Yeah, it's
Um,
HP.
wow, that's awesome.
I like
Well,
that.
we're live. Hi.
Oh, did everyone just catch my printing live? Did I
Yeah,
just out myself as an older
he's printing
an
questions.
older millennial? Oh, that's amazing.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Danielle Moderates. And today we have an absolute icon legend. Yeah, I know. Scary to be called that, but
Yeah.
I think that's what you are.
Expectations
And
are just going down now. Thank you very much, Danielle. That's very kind.
well, I would also call myself a legend. So we are live here with two legends for a really interesting, hopefully, an important conversation about what is speak up culture and how do we cultivate it, not just within our teams, but in our own lives, that then translates to how we show up at work and beyond. We'll also delve a little bit deeper into the incoming generation slash new generation to the workplace, how we might engage them in different and meaningful ways, as well as, how can the different generations within the workplace, because there are 5 of them, really help and learn from each other to collectively cultivate speak up cultures. And then we'll go into a little bit of detail as to, what do managers need right now, in order to lead this generation into our next. So, hi.
Hello. I'm pumped because you spend so much more time in the gen and multi-generational space than I do. Like over my career as I was born in 87, so I'm a hardcore millennial. And everyone's like, "Oh, you should do generation in the workforce stuff." And I'm like, "Eh." So you know way more about that than I do. So I'm pumped to learn from you and
Thank you.
sort of mix our collective legendry together. And
And
then
our
yeah, I
audience.
mean we can make generalizations about generations because and there's nuances for culture and where you grew up, but a generation comes of age at a time, much like people who are in high school right now have come of age in an era of COVID that
Mhm.
very much influences what happens as they get older,
Their
around
decision making,
socialization and masks and
totally.
decision making and jobs and things they want to solve. So, anyway, yes, pumped to be here.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's really cool that this isn't really something that you've delved into all that much in terms of, this specific topic from an intergenerational approach, because I think it is important to break it down and to figure out, well, how could one generation learn from another and how could we learn from each other? And really, like, in a perfect world, we would be able to identify the specific skills
Mm,
and talents of each person teaching another person and be able to learn from each other.
mm,
Um, and that sort of has, like, it's kind of a generalization to say that boomers don't know how to use technology
yeah.
and, Gen Zers do. Like, I'm intimidated by TikTok and I'm Gen Z. So,
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
yeah, exactly. And it makes you feel, right, like comforted and like you're less alone.
Yeah.
So I
I
feel
I
even just, yeah,
cannot floss. Oh, that felt good to say out loud.
I cannot do my taxes alone,
Fair. Fair.
right?
Yeah. But can
That's
you
awesome.
floss and do your taxes at the same time?
Oh,
Uh,
that's a good point.
yeah.
I didn't think about that one. um, I know that you just got back from a speaking tour, so I kind of wanted to ask you, how are you right now, and how are you adjusting to being back? I know you've been back for maybe a couple days, 24 hours. I'm not sure, but yeah.
So I am on week 4 of 5 straight weeks of travel. I got back last night. Have a book manuscript due on Monday. Have about 12 more thousand words to edit. I've edited so far about 24,000. But yeah, we really want to put our best foot forward and make the work on my amazing editor, Kendra, as little as possible. So, I mean, how am I? I'm here. I'm present. I have a mild headache. I'm sipping coffee and took some Tylenol to help with it. And I'm exceptionally grateful for the crisp fall air here in Toronto, being able to walk my daughter to school this morning, which was a treat. Checked in with my in-laws. They were on vacation in Charlottetown in Prince Edward Island right before Hurricane Fiona hit.
Wow.
And our good friend Dave Cairns was impacted by that, unfortunately. But he's okay, as is his newly minted generator. But yeah, they left the last flight out of Charlottetown before the entire island closed and was without power, and then came home and had COVID. So I had a chance to call them and check in with them as well. But yeah, no, things are good. I travel again next week, 2 cities, and then a week off, and then a week on, 2 cities, and then a week off, and then a week on, 1 city. So it's a lot and it's hard. Especially, that was my norm pre-COVID. And at the time, my kids were 1 and 4 when COVID hit. And then I didn't travel for a good 18 months. And then it started, and now it's back to normal, if not increased. I mean, this is the most I think I've traveled in my career ever in a successive amount of time, because I think people are so eager, and executive teams are so eager to get back together in person, which is great. Yeah.
Are you feeling like how do you create boundaries for yourself as far as traveling? Because I'll tell a quick story that happened to me recently. I was confronted by my physical health and problems with it. I have not talked about this actually ever online. And I talked about it for the first time on like a podcast yesterday. And that won't be out for a while. So here I am.
Sneak peek.
I have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. It impacts 10 to 20% of the female population in America. And it's largely under talked about because because like people usually don't know that they have it, because it impacts your sleep, your mental health, your weight, your hormones. It's a hormone condition basically. And it really, like, I was kind of in denial about it, and I didn't talk to my friends about it because
Well, I hope
path forward for me. Because I never found a doctor that was able to actually treat me holistically.
I just lost you for like 15 seconds there. You said it's a hormonal condition. I'm not sure if everyone else lost you. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a hormone condition. And basically I was diagnosed with it like 8 years ago. And there's never been a doctor who was able to treat me like holistically in the way that I really wanted to be treated, instead of just treating symptoms, root causes. And so I hit a point where I was like, I can't like ignore this anymore. And it was, travel is really hard on the body. I'm sure you know that. And so I was traveling. I've been traveling a lot for work and for life the past year and a half. And finally, I had a breakdown and I was like, I need to take care of my physical health. But the kicker was that in just 3 weeks, I was supposed to travel to Paris for work and be with my team for a couple weeks. And I wasn't ready to do that. Like, I needed more time. So I have a monthly check-in with my boss every, to just talk about how are you doing outside
Mhm.
of the projects you're working on and whatnot. We have a weekly meeting. Um, but essentially, I told him what was happening, and he said, take the day off, take the week off if you need it. I need you to take care of yourself, and then, come back when you feel like you're ready. And Paris can wait. We don't need to get together this month. It can be next month. It's not like, you need to be here now.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that was a huge moment for me, because although I've had moments where I had to take the day off or take a couple hours off, and that was totally fine, I've never actually put off an entire on-site and off-site for, and been that transparent with like a team.
Yep.
And so I ask you the same thing of like, it's personal and professional. It's the same. It's, life work integration, right?
Yep.
How are you setting boundaries and kind of flagging those moments for yourself throughout, the past couple of weeks, and also earlier in your career, if you are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as doing as good of a job as I could. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, we're here to talk about speak up culture, and what an amazing sort of display that you felt psychologically safe enough to share your truth and use your voice to share what was actually happening versus feeling like you couldn't. I mean, kudos to your leader for having check-ins where, hey, let's not talk about work. Let's talk about how you're doing and what you need, because I know that as a fellow human being, the more we speak about you holistically, the more you'll bring and the better you'll be at work, right?
Mhm.
And I think, one of the, as with any tragedy or hardship, there can be and are silver linings, and there have been, and I think will continue to be silver linings and healthy things that have come out of COVID. I think one of them is previously when the knowledge economy went into an office, we would leave our physical homes, we would put on different clothes, we would go to work, and I think more people than today put on their corporate garb and shielded what was going on at home, who they maybe are, and their strengths and talents and skills and desires and dreams and emotions, and just power through a day and then go home. This is, you said work life integration, which I agree with. It's not work life balance as if they're, two opposing forces. It's work life integration. Um, and we feel integrated when we love who we can be at home and we love who we can be at work. If in one or more of those places we feel off, we are being inauthentic.
Yeah.
And too much inauthenticity for too long is unhealthy. I mean, we even know in the world's best actors, I think it's about they can go for 30 days pretending to be someone that they're not. But
Mm,
after 30 days, it begins to mess with their own psychology. We saw this with Keith Ledger and the Joker, right? He
yeah.
embodied that character so much and for too long that he found places within himself that he wasn't comfortable with, and it
Mm,
unfortunately led in suicide. And so, it's the ability for us to be authentic and to be in environments that encourage and enable us to be authentic. And the definition of authenticity is saying and doing the things we actually believe,
mm,
which it sounds like you took a vulnerable risk to do so and say, hey, boss, I'm really struggling with my health physically and mentally. And this trip to Paris is giving me anxiety. I'm now putting words into your experience. So let me know if I'm getting it wrong. Um, but what an awesome speak up culture opportunity. Um, and the way I define a speak up culture is we feel safe to share our ideas, even if they're half baked, share our concerns, even if they're unpopular, disagree, even with senior leaders, and admit mistakes. It's really, can we be truthful, and are we rewarded for our truth? So to hit your question head on, how have I or do I set boundaries? I can do a better job. Um, you know, it's hard for me to reintegrate coming back home, because when I go on the road, I have freedom. Like I've quite a bit of freedom. I can do what I want when I want. I can go out for dinners. I can
Yeah.
have calls and meetings early in the morning or late at night. I can exercise if and when I want. Meanwhile, my wife and my 6 and 3-year-old at home, they're on the schedule.
Yeah.
And then I re-enter, often changing time zones, often tired. And I mean, my wife said it to me last weekend. It's like you go away, and then sometimes, for 4 or 5 days, sometimes I'm gone for a day, sometimes I'm gone for 10 days. But I re-enter, and it's if I've forgotten what it's like to be a dad of young kids, because freedom, like the ability to choose what I want to do when I want to do, top value for me. And when having kids, that value lowers by the nature of of the 24/7 job of what it means to be a parent. So, I mean, I have forced in boundaries, like I have to be a present father, or I choose and try to be a present father. And I have feedback from the person who knows me better than anyone in the world when I'm showing up great and when I'm showing
Right.
up like a total jerk. Um, so I think I have some forced in boundaries by virtue of being a life partner and sharing a life with someone, as well as being a dad to 2 young kids. It's not something I'm great at. Um, However, I do have in my calendar, I've blocked time until 9:15 to give myself space to walk my daughter to school. And rare is the exception where I will break that. I
Mhm.
also typically plug out by 5, typically, so that I can be present for family time and
Mhm.
dinner,
Yeah.
especially when I'm home. And then I'll often work at night, not every night, more nights than not, from 8:30 to whatever. But putting in sort of those non-negotiable times for me uh, is great.
Yeah. And it looks different from my schedule because I am a single, 20-something-year-old where I don't have the schedule of other people that I'm working around. So it's
Yep.
a really good point. But when I go to Paris, which I am next Thursday, which I'm very excited about, I operate on the team schedule. So it's kind of similar in that way where it's like it's not only up to me when I'm working in person, it's up to the discretion of how the team operates and what we need collectively because I'm there for work.
Well, you're also, it sounds like you're a good team member, because I think there are team members who go, "That's not gonna work for me."
That's
And I
possible.
mean, if you're from Paris and have kids who end school at 3:45 and you gotta pick them up and you don't have childcare that day, you know, sometimes other roles, uh, trump team roles, and
Yeah.
great teams, I think, are aware of that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think you choose to flex to be a good teammate, it sounds like.
Probably. Also, something you said about, blocking time off reminded me of a conversation that I had just last week about, how do you how do you sort of, so I was talking about quiet quitting.
Mm,
I've actually been interviewed about the quiet quitting thing like 3 times in the past week,
yeah.
which I'm grateful for. I like, being interviewed. It's just funny.
Well, it's
To
funny how there's now a new term and a new thing,
Yeah,
who's ever in charge of these, great resignation, quiet quitting.
right. Well, it
Kudos
came
for
from a
sticking
Gen
terms.
Zer.
Mm.
The term itself came from a TikTok by some 20-something-year-old. So,
And it's
um,
not a new phenomena. I mean, people have
yeah,
been quiet
it's
quitting or
I think it's
missing in
called
place.
coasting at your job,
Or
right?
it's when apathy sets in.
Yeah. That's like the more scientific term, like social
Yeah.
sciences. But I say that to say, I was talking about how do you avoid quiet quitting or like quiet firing, whatever. And like my suggestion, or one of them, is like, don't be afraid to, but be willing to share the things that you're doing in your own life to help support your mental health
Mm-hmm.
and all types of health. But that's a good example of one. It's like you just shared with the audience here, I'm blocking out time, and like my wife calls me out. Like those are two things that someone else could do, is like have someone, have that conversation with
Yeah.
someone, say like, when I'm not showing up, I want you to call me out on it so that I can do
Mm-hmm.
better.
Well, the recipe for letdown is having expectations you don't communicate. It's like when someone's text messaging you and it's your dinner time and they may or may not be in the same time zone, and you're like, ugh, how could they? And it's like,
Yeah.
have you let them know? Like, part of the issue is it's as if we have uh, uh, a doorbell in our minds that anyone can ring whenever they want. Ding dong, and then boom, distraction, boom, piss off. And it's like, you have to have the technology work for you, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've become the product for the technology because our eyeballs are worth money. And so we have to purposefully shut it off or turn off notifications, or even if, like, admittedly I have my phone right here, but I've turned it so that it's this way it's facing, because if I have
Mhm.
it this way and even it just flashes, I'm no
Yeah.
longer as present here, I'm looking there.
Right.
um so
Yeah.
yeah.
My phone automatically goes on do not disturb from 9 to 5. Even if like I take a break sometimes during the day to like go work out, or go to brunch, or go to a event. The other week I went to Reels school in the middle of the day, and I told my team about it because I'm the director of growth and marketing. So if I need to upskill in the middle of the day, there's no getting around that, right? And that's work, and that's life work integration. Like
Yep.
that's so
And
anyway,
it's also
that's
responsible communication to say, team,
right,
I will be out, um and, like, it takes effort, but you can set up systems in your phone that if certain people call, it can
right,
bypass silence.
right.
um
Favorites.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is again designing the tech to work for you.
A friend of mine also, Taylor Harrington, she's a community
I know
builder.
Taylor. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah,
and
you do know
Taylor, 'cause she
Taylor.
worked for
Oh my
Seth.
gosh,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
worlds are just colliding. It's
yeah.
so
Taylor's
funny.
awesome.
I love her, and she implemented this, like, no plans for on Mondays rule, where she doesn't make any plans on Mondays, and, like, she won't stray from that because Mondays are for her to be at home to, like, ground herself and be with her partner, and that's so dope.
Yep.
Uh, I wanted to switch gears a little bit, to talk a little bit about like the challenges. I think that maybe from a generational perspective that we're having, in the workplace. And I'm curious, like, you just got back from a speaking tour for 5 weeks. It's a long time. Are there are there some like trends or commonalities that you've
Mm.
seen? I know you speak a lot to, executive leaders. Maybe what are some of like the challenges that they're facing at work as far as like communication goes, and maybe even communication with like younger talent?
Yeah. I want to know your perspective too, and I'm not going to provide a
Yeah.
comprehensive, holistic answer. I mean, one of the interesting things is a lot of the people that I work with are already thinking and operating differently. So a lot of I work with a lot of great leaders. I usually, I'll do a keynote or a talk or a fireside chat. But if I'm really going to embed and work closely with a team or a specific leader, I'm only going to spend my time feeding the hungry.
Yeah.
I'm happy to preach a little and see if we can, get some more people onto the side of putting human beings first, and not profit first. But most of the leaders I work with are great leaders, or at
Mm.
least humble leaders, right? I don't really waste my time trying to convince people who are shitty leaders. Like, nah, like I want to keep the flywheel going. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend too much time for someone who wants to debate me on the merits of putting human beings first in their business, or who say it but behave totally counter to it.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows that people are the most important asset to this business. First of all, I've never met a human being who likes to be called an asset. And you can say it, but then your actions speak very differently as you balance your books every year by laying off thousands of people. Uh,
Yeah.
so, I mean, one of the things I'm noticing, even, particularly inside of large organizations, is this struggle and push and pull with back to office mandates. Blech.
Well,
Which, like, listen, there are certain, listen, like, you need to listen. I know you get this. There
listen
are
up, guys
Listen up
and
now. This
girls.
is gonna be important. So there I I am a fan of humanity as a whole. And what we know about human beings is in-person interactions mean something. Like let's look at this objectively. Uh, we met thanks to LinkedIn. I was on a podcast with Caleb Parker. You listen to that podcast. You're like, hey, that was great. We connected. Like, how awesome is that? And we have a psychographic relationship. We share beliefs and values of how we think the world should operate and human beings, operate within it. There's diversity in our experiences. There's diversity in our viewpoints. But you and I share in a lot of the same thoughts and visions and ideas, which is great.
Right.
We're on the same team. Um, we have a psychographic relationship. Like you're in New York, I'm in Toronto. We both travel around, but like we share a relationship because we share values and beliefs. That's how we're designed as a species. Our definition of integrity is similar, which is integrity is very subjective, by the way. Um,
Mm.
so we've never met in person, and yet I would consider you a friend. We have a friendship, right? Cool. If I'm in New York and I've got time, I'm like, I want to go meet up with Danielle. I'm a really big believer that the nature of the work should dictate where it happens.
Mm.
There are certain things that I think are amplified in person, relationship building, brainstorming, not necessarily innovation, because the innovation typically does not happen in the brainstorm. The innovation happens in the pauses where someone's,
Mm.
traveling or going home or, taking a pee and goes, oh my God, that's it. Right. Which is why, again, we should take these things down, because if we're always looking at them, we lose the opportunity to have those moments of eureka in the pause. The other thing that I think, um, being in person helps to create is serendipity, which I think we're missing a lot of in our virtual world, where everything is scheduled sometimes back to back. You
Yeah.
know, we could be having this conversation in a live studio. We say, great, thanks. We break, we're about to leave. And as we're leaving, there's a pastry table and we're like, ooh, let's grab a pastry. And we both reach for a cranberry muffin. And I'm like, you like cranberry muffins? And you're like, I love cranberry muffins. I live for them. The antioxidants, it's the best thing, right? I don't love cranberry muffins
I
that much.
make them.
Yeah, cool. And I'm like, I love cranberry muffins, right? Now we could collaborate on a project 5 years from now, and we're in a contentious moment, and it's hard, and we're disagreeing on something, or it's not moving as quick as it could, and we're frustrated, right? Which is normal. And I could say, huh, could really go for a cranberry muffin around now. And we break into tears and we're laughing because it's so funny, right?
Yeah.
That serendipity happens more easily in person. But I think mandating people to come in 9 to 5, 3 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever, if the nature of the work dictates that that doesn't need to happen, it's kind of silly.
Right.
To force people to drive in, waste gas, waste time, increase the likelihood that they're going to get in an accident just so that they can sit in an office and be on a Zoom meeting. Are you freaking kidding me? And I think it's also from a generational perspective, or even from a psychographic perspective, because I don't think this is only older white men
Yeah.
who have this issue. I
Right.
think it's in general insecure leaders wish to exert control over others,
Right.
whereas more secure leaders are confident that they trust, empower their people to get their job done. So I think one of the things that a lot of people are grappling with are these back to office mandates, which
Right.
I don't think are smart or good.
It's interesting. I mean, there's so many thoughts going through my head right now, but one of them is people who have moved
Yeah.
outside of the city that they formerly worked in every single day. That has largely driven whatever that resistance, whatever you want to call it, has largely driven the flexible first policies.
Sure.
And since that's happened, people have created these hyper localized communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it like the renaissance of community, or the rebirth of physical community, because when was the last time we had a potluck like you see on Desperate Housewives? Like, people weren't home to spend the time and invest the time in their local communities. And now they have been for the past 2 years. There was nothing else to do but, help out a neighbor, or, go to the park and meet other people from
Mm-hmm.
6 feet away. So, like, in my mind, and in some other people like Omar Ramirez and Noel Borda, they were both on a panel 2 nights ago that I went to, and they were both kind of saying, like, you don't only have to engage with your communities at work. Like, you should have communities outside of work.
Yep.
And I think that for those of us, and it's a very generational thing, like, not because it's like Gen Z versus Gen X, but it's like the time in your life where you're a 20-something-year-old and you're working in New York City is very different from the time, and you have all the time to spend and like a little bit of money to spend, but not exorbitant amounts, is very different from the time when you're in your 40s and you have kids and you've now settled down and bought a house, and you like the consistency and you want to invest time in your hyper local communities.
Mm-hmm.
So those two experiences are very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we say, you have to come back to the office, largely it doesn't make sense because it's not an experience. Like, the experience of going to the office, people go to the office for different things, and they're seeking different things.
Sure.
And different amounts of it, right? So if you're 20, 24, you want to go to the office or a co-working space to meet other people so that you can go out and have fun and go to client dinners and all this stuff and do the fun things and like create community, because you largely don't have it yet. And then if you're, on the older side and you've been in the industry for a while, you have a community of people, of friends, you have a professional community, you've been networking for years, and maybe what you're looking for at the office is to make new connections or learn new skills,
Or get out of the house.
or get out of the house and have like private time.
Yeah.
So I
Or
think like,
meet people in person because you want to have
yeah,
one-on-ones with your team or whatever it
with,
might be.
or with adults.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I just want to read some of the comments really quick
Hmm.
because I haven't.
There's one quick point, which is leaders and organizations are allowed to make the choices they want to make. They just have to live with the ramifications. You can make mandates, but when someone just as someone needs to own the impact of their decisions, if they previously lived in Austin, Texas, and they moved to
Right.
Fresno, like everyone has to live with the ramifications of those decisions on mandates and where you choose to work.
Right.
So
Or like when companies decided, or people hiring managers decided, oh, I can hire from anywhere. Great.
yeah.
You have to deal with the ramifications of that decision.
Yep. And then say, oh, now you need to come in the office. It's like you hired me and I live in Argentina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are countless stories about that. Like it's crazy. So first I want to say, okay, Jennifer Todd, hi. In-person workplace dynamics were broken pre-pandemic. The romantic idea of energy socialization, idea synergy is largely a falsehood. Hot take. I like it.
In person, but
I wouldn't know because I've never worked in an office.
yeah. I mean, yeah, the only issue I have is there's a lot of absolutes in this statement. So in-person workplace dynamics were broken pre-pandemic. Maybe in a lot of places, but not necessarily everywhere. I mean,
Right.
I've been working on a remote team for the last 11 years. Like and some of that workplace work. So anyway, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can
Disagreeing
always
with
improve.
leaders. That's what most leaders struggle with.
Disagree with leaders. Yeah, well, and so nice, Anoop. Hi. Good to see you here, a fellow Canadian. Yeah, so when it comes to a speak up culture, one of the greatest things leaders can do is invite dissent. Quote from Admiral Bill McCraven: "Bad news never gets better with time." So the earlier
Mm,
you hear dissenting views or bad news, and then reward it as opposed to punishing it, because as soon as you punish bad news, all the bad news just disappears. Doesn't mean there isn't bad news. It just means people are sweeping it under the rug or
got
sharing
it.
it amongst their peers, but not to the people who have the authority. Dangerous. So totally, Anoop. And the greatest leaders among us have the humility to say, you will disagree with me, and I want to hear about it. And when you tell me
Mm.
about it, I will reward you.
That was my next question for you, because I want to go a little bit deeper there, because so my friends and people of my age group, so under 25, are entering the workforce and or have been in it for a few years. And when they come in, there needs to be that, like psychological safety or openness to ideas in order for the fresh perspective that you only have for 6 months
Yep.
to be taken advantage of and leveraged.
Which is where
And
a lot of innovation lives.
100%. And I love this one example of that. There are tons, but Duolingo, their TikTok
Okay.
popped off.
You just said
Which
some
means
words I don't understand, but
popped
that's
off
okay.
means it got
No,
really
I
popular really fast.
Duolingo. I don't know what that is.
Duolingo is a language learning app. And a lot of companies were having, or do still have, trouble with TikTok. Obviously, I do too. And what they did was they actually made I think she was like 24, 25-year old Zaria, their head of global marketing, or some global head of social media. and gave her the reins. And like, not to say that she didn't earn it or whatever, but like, she's in her 20s and she's leading this, multi-million dollar company's social media strategy. Very smart, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the type of, that's the type of leadership that like I would want to go work for. Same thing with Airbnb, announcing work from anywhere, then getting 1 million views on their career page. It's those leaders who are willing to take the leap of faith.
Yep.
To
totally.
To do it, right? But also to like, the first step is like listening. In your opinion, how, like, where do you feel like, in my opinion, the younger generation, we struggle with, and any generation coming who's new to the workforce, we struggle with like confidence. Some people like to call it imposter syndrome. I like to call it just a weakness in confidence.
Sure. Or inexperience.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, but like when we are leveraged and we are asked and considered and given the spotlight or the opportunity, a lot of the time it can work out. So how do you approach that? Like, this sort of resistance to letting younger generations have a voice and bring ideas.
Yeah.
And also the resistance to it.
So a couple things come up here. So one is, what is the actual job of leadership? And another is a concept that my friend, who's a retired Navy SEAL, Rich Davini, has come up with, called dynamic subordination or alpha swapping. And by the way, Chris Early, I agree, serendipity can happen remotely. We just have to work harder at it. It doesn't happen automatically. We can use apps. Like, there's great stuff. Anyway, there's my ADD working for the better. So dynamic subordination. So Rich retired from the Navy, and he started doing some speaking and facilitating on high performance teams and trust. Kind of makes sense coming from someone who was in a specialized SEAL team and did selection and promotion for all of the SEAL teams. And he was asked, what's an ideal task organization chart? Like, how do you design organizations and teams to perform optimally? And Rich didn't really know. Like, he kind of knew the answer, but he didn't have a good way to answer it. And so, as opposed to muffling through an answer, he decided to first talk about what it's not. So he said, well, I know it's not the top-down hierarchical pyramid where I am your leader, you work for me, which ironically, a lot of the military works that way. Yeah. Not ripe for innovation. It's do as I say. It's slow. Information trickles down. Oftentimes, decisions that are made don't consider frontline context and information. The revolt to the pyramid is a flat organizational structure, which is like a nice idea. Let's flatten this thing out. Everyone has a voice. We're all equal, except we're not, because we're still a hierarchical species. And a flat structure might work for 2 to 5, people working in a garage for a startup where everything knows things about everything. But yet there's still contexts where people should step up. It's people's domain. Even in holacracy or self-management, there are still leads and circles. Like, right. It makes sense for people to step up, as well as in a flat organizational structure, you can't see decisions that are being made left or right because there's no dissemination of information. It's all flat. The one that's nicest philosophically but still isn't right is the inverse pyramid, the servant leadership model. Robert Greenleaf writes about this one, and it's nice. It's the leader sits on the bottom and supports their people. If there's any one we should default to philosophically, it's that one, that leaders show up to serve their people. The only issue is inside of high performing and great teams, the burden of responsibility isn't on any one person. Power and burden is distributed, right? So out of frustration, it's not those three. Though there are elements that are beneficial of those three at sometimes. If you're in an emergency situation, you need hierarchy. Tell people what to do and go, right? But we're not in crisis all the time. So
Hopefully.
in frustration, Rich drew a blob, like an amoeba looking thing. And he asked the room, where does the leader sit here? And they're like, I don't know, the middle, the outside. And he went, yeah, the leader is where the leader needs to be.
Mm,
It's dynamic based on the context of what's happening and who's closest to the problem and who's best suited to lead in that context. That person should step up and lead. If it happens to be a 24 junior person, great. If it happens to be a senior person, cool. But we need the vulnerability to wear our strengths and weaknesses on our sleeves to be a high performing dynamic team where we swap who's leading, as well as embrace diversity of perspective in order for it to work. The other piece of this is the job of leadership. And the job of leadership isn't to catch more fish. The job of leadership is to teach people to catch more fish in their own way and their own right. I heard from a very senior VP of marketing from a large organization that we all know well in the sports apparel industry say, if I'm the best marketer in the room, we have an issue. My job is not to be the best marketer. My job is to create the condition that the genius people I have on my team bring their best work and best ideas. That's the job of leadership. So I love that a younger person who seems to be best suited to lead in the context is stepping up. And I still hope they're being supported and nurtured to truly know that what their role as a leader is, which is
right.
not to be the best and to do it all. But if you're really leading a multi-million-dollar account, you need a team. And if you're the best marketer or social media person in the room and you own social media and marketing, that's an issue.
It's also such a good point of reference for people of older generations who might feel less comfortable with technology, to remember that even if you're leading a tech team itself, like, or a team of developers, you don't have to be the smartest one. And that like removes a lot of the self-doubt, I think, or the pressure to be something that you're maybe not, or like keep up and also do all the, other things that you have to do in your day to day, like managing people.
Yep.
Which is the hardest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it also removes some of the stress on myself, because at 22, I landed the job as director of growth and marketing. What? Like, that's wild, right?
Yep.
And it's like leading also a YC company where there's a lot of like pressure to succeed. And that's like, I jumped into the lion's den right away.
Yep.
And also, I, at the same time, got a mindset coach to help me, because I knew that my confidence was low. And I knew that the only way I was able to step up and to become the leader, both of myself and of my work and my future team, the only way I could do that was by strengthening myself first.
Yep. Well, there's no mistake that every single leadership development program that I've ever heard of, participated in, or facilitated in all starts with a module on leading self and self-awareness, right? Leaders need to build their own security, need to build their own awareness and confidence in order to play their fiddle well and then teach others how to play their instrument well in their own right. And the way that you do it won't be the same the way that people on your team will do it, because we're all taught the golden rule in kindergarten: do unto others as you would want done unto yourself, which is nice for kindergarten, but it lacks empathy as an adult. I'm a far bigger believer in the platinum rule: do unto others as others would want done unto themselves, which requires relationship, which requires knowing someone's preferences and their love languages and how they wish to be recognized and how they work best, right? That's the purpose of these tools like DISC and StrengthsFinder and all these personality assessments. And then to your point around, I mean, kudos to you for getting the coaching and the support you need. Amazing. Because so imposter syndrome is when you are typically a high performer and succeeding, and you're like, I don't deserve to be in the role that I'm in, right? And so you are very aware of like, wow, I'm punching above my class here. Either I'll crumble under the pressure, or I can work on what's actually in my control and be the best that I can be. Do that. The only way to beat imposter syndrome, because we're all faking it. We're all in ambiguity and uncertainty and stress and fear and change. Duh, we're human. So I think, yeah, the greatest leaders among us focus on what's actually in my control and how can I influence it for the better.
That's such a good point. What you said before that about, and I think it kind of answered this question, like, what do managers need right now to lead this generation or others to our next? Because I think it does require like personal work, and it also requires us to get to know our teams.
Yep. Is that my cue?
Well, it's also, yeah, like because it's hard to build that trust and those relationships remotely, while also trying to figure out how do you do that for your team within itself, or like inter-team. Yep. Like it's like a big challenge.
So there's 3 chapters in the book that are like right toward the middle front, or the front middle, where I talk about the ramifications of not having a speak up culture, and the fact that our relationship with our boss has more of an impact on our health than that of our relationship with our family doctor. Fact. National Institute of Health on that one. And speaking up is good for business, but yet people don't speak up, and people don't speak up typically because of fear. It's not worth the risk, or apathy. It's not going to change anything. And so the best way to create an environment in which people do feel safe to share ideas, concerns, disagreement, mistakes, personal things that affect how they show up, is to create an environment where people's truth is rewarded. Now, vulnerability doesn't mean sharing all things all the time. There are details about our lives and our health that should remain details about our lives and our health, and there's an appropriate amount of information to share. And then there's oversharing. Like, didn't need to know all of that, but I do need to know, or I'm better for knowing some of it, or a lot of it, So vulnerability doesn't mean sharing all things all the time with everyone. That could be irresponsible and oversharing. Vulnerability is about context. And the biggest barriers to a speak up culture is the behaviors of leaders. And so I've written these 3 chapters that are like kind of one big chapter, but we broke it out to leadership defined, support leaders. Leadership to define, select better leaders, and support leaders better. So first and foremost, we promote people in the wrong way. We often promote on skills. We often promote on performance, which is a great way to create a toxic culture, because we often look at who's the best performer, who's the most responsible, who's most driven, often who's the most extroverted and charismatic. Which, by the way, extroversion and charisma are not linked to leadership. Some of the best leaders I know are introverts, because they step up not because they like the spotlight. They step up because they feel called to, right? And I'm an extrovert. Sometimes I speak up because it's fun and I like to be in the spotlight. Like, I enjoy it. Bad for leadership, right? That's more narcissism. So I really need to ensure am I in the spotlight? Am I speaking up to serve, or am I speaking up to be seen or to feed my own confidence or ego or whatever it is?
Or are your own words lining up with your action behind the scenes?
Oh,
That's always a
totally.
good check for myself.
Yes, and you're speaking to authenticity and integrity, which are huge pieces of leadership. So I think we need to have a better standard definition of what it means to be a leader societally, but definitely within our organizations. We ought to define these are the behaviors that we expect of leaders if you work here. I think they should include empathy and compassion. They should include authenticity and consistency. They should include decisiveness and accountability and responsibility. These are some of the attributes, the characteristics of what make leaders great. And all we need to do is think of a great leader or a great friend in our lives, list those behaviors, bada bing, bada boom, you got leadership behaviors.
Did you
Then
say did you say curiosity?
I think empathy is the gateway to curiosity. I
Mm,
mean, you know, we are curious when we ask genuine, open-ended questions and then care to listen to the answer. So I think curiosity, empathy, compassion.
I was thinking more about it in the lines of like learning and development.
Yes, which is also humility.
Mm,
So I think some of the greatest leaders are humble, meaning that they can be confident, but they're not arrogant.
mm,
Right? Confidence is I believe I'm good, but I know I can always get better. It's a learning student mindset. Arrogance is I believe I'm the best in the room,
right.
which is more to the line of expertise. I'm very weary of people who call themselves leaders or who call themselves experts. Run. Uh, Arrogance, by the way, is a form of insecurity expressed. It's just loud. And so when we realize someone is being arrogant because they're insecure, it's like, oh, that's so cute. They're insecure. We can actually have greater empathy toward it. So I
Mhm.
think we need to define what we mean by leaders. And then the most important thing is we have to select against that definition.
Yeah.
If we do the work to define it and then worse, still continue to select the highest performers, just because you're a great individual performer or get the best results doesn't mean you're a good mentor, coach, guide, listener. You don't necessarily have the attributes of what it means to be a great leader. And then we need to support leaders better. There's a huge gap between when people take charge or have roles of leadership formally, and we don't give them training. We need to give them communities and coaching and training. You know, you've done it on your own, but you're the exception, you're not the rule. And so I think it's this trifecta of define what we mean by it, select against it, and prioritize trust over performance,
Mm,
and then support those who wish to lead or who are flung into leadership roles.
yeah. And it also reminds me of like, on the note of supporting, giving leaders the right tools to help their teams feel seen, valued, heard, no matter where they're logging on from.
Yep.
Going back to the earlier, conversation about remote work and office mandates. I want to highlight Chris's point. So many teams have always been remote from each other much of the time across different
Mm,
buildings, cities, and countries. Buildings is an interesting one. It
yeah,
sometimes feel like we've forgotten this
totally. Yeah,
valid.
you work on this huge, corporate campus and you have cross-functional teams that are literally in different buildings. That's remote working.
It is.
Totally.
Um, Michelle, Gen Z are often intuitively linked to technology and pushing technological outputs within existing workplace. That's where we fit in as we come into the workplace. How should those who yearn more physical interaction speak up when it comes to leadership? And how do we imbue trust in our older generations?
I mean, the funny thing with trust is I can't force you to behave in a way that will um uh I can't force you to behave in a way that will allow you to trust me more. I can if we have a close enough relationship, um I recently had a relationship with someone who's a senior leader to me. I had an experience with them that was counter to who I believe them to be at their best and as their values. I also have empathy for how much they have on their plate. I have empathy for the fact that they're doing the best they can with the time and tools that they have. And I also make up the story that the way they treated me had more of a representation of how much time they have, and the fact that we have such a great relationship, so they can kind of be more casual with me, doesn't change the fact that they behaved in a way that diminished a bit of trust in our relationship.
Mm.
Now, because I trust and love and respect this individual so much, I'm going to write them an email and say, "Can we chat?" And there are some things that happened that wasn't your intention, but it had a negative impact on me, and it's worth our relationship for us to have that conversation.
Yeah.
All I can provide is extend empathy and provide feedback. If I don't extend empathy and I don't provide feedback, we both lose, right? I could say, "Oh, what a jerk," and not give them feedback. Shame on me. Now, there needs to be psychological safety for that speak up culture to happen, but the greatest way to build trust is to extend it first.
Mm. It's 12 o'clock Eastern time. I know that we are wrapping up, and I want to be respectful of your time, Shed. Do you have any final words or things that you want people to know?
I mean, the thing that strikes me, I mean, in many respects, we need to remember that we are a community-based species. We're not designed to care for thousands upon thousands of people. Robin Dunbar has done great work to prove that we can maintain about 150 stable social relationships. Stable social relationship means, like, we have one. If you walked into a coffee shop and I saw you, I'd be like, "Danielle, sit down, let's have coffee," right? But that's not with everyone. That's only with about 150. Some of us are as high as 250, some of us as low as 100, but the average is 150. We spend, I think it's 40% of our time with 5 people, and then the next 20% of our time with the next 10 people. So 60% of our time is spent with a core of 15 people, right? I think we need to realize that. And so much of our experience at work and life is really with a smaller, close knit group of people. And then I think of, what is it that we want? Well, we want to be treated as human beings with respect and dignity and kindness. We want to be paid fairly and equally, for the work and the value that we bring. And we want to be trusted and offered flexibility. If I say, "Hey, I need to stay home today because I have some things going on with kids, I need to take them to some appointments, I'm going to be on for this amount of time," that level of responsibility and communication should be rewarded, not there's an office mandate on Thursday and you have to come in, you know? So it's not rocket science. It's treat people as the human beings they are, pay them fairly, and offer them flexibility, trust, and empower them. Ta-da!
I want a list of leaders who are doing that. That would be a good list, and I'm sure that would generate a lot of traction for their career pages.
Oh, very cool. Ooh, I like that idea.
Idea. I have a million of them a day.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to do something with that, please go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, come do it with me and we'll have fun. I would say that my takeaway from this conversation, there are so many, honestly, but I think that as we navigate this next, finding ways to open doors and to listen more intentionally and creating those spaces where, yes, serendipity can happen, but also where psychological safety is present should be top of mind. Because right now is a really interesting time where not only do we have the opportunity to reimagine how, where, when, and who we work with,
Mm-hmm.
but also people have opinions. And when people have opinions, it opens doors it can open doors to radical change because they care.
Yep.
And if there's more than just one person or just the people ops team who care about culture and who care about communications and how we're treating each other at work, then I think that can do a lot for not only organizations but society as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because we only have a certain amount of time in a day, and don't you want to hear the opinions of your people and how things could get better from a culture or product or anything perspective? And how might you, even at scale, create a space where those opinions can be shared, whether they're written or video or in live conversation? Um, you know, want innovation? It's right there. You just have to create the condition where people feel that it's worth it to share it.
Mm-hmm. Boom. How can people reach you? What are you doing? What do you want people to know?
Sure. I'm active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect or reach out here. The website is Shed Inspires, SHED inspires.com. I appreciate having this conversation because it gives me some energy as an extrovert to go tackle some more of the book that I am submitting on Monday as a first draft of the manuscript. The book, Speak Up Culture: When Leaders Truly Listen, People Step Up, will be out. Our tentative, this is the first time I'm saying this out loud, our tentative launch date is October 3rd, 2023. So almost a year from now,
Wow.
subject to change. But yeah.
Need that flexibility.
there's a lot of metadata in that project management chart that is being wonderfully managed by my team at Page 2.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. I hope we can do this again, maybe
Would love to.
closer to the book launch date. And I hope you have a great Friday. Great Friday. Wow,
Yes,
it's Friday.
it
Oh my
is.
gosh.
Thank you. I know this was a long time coming. So delighted to do it. And again soon.
Definitely.
Cool.
All right. Have a great one, everyone. I will end the stream and stay inspired.
Seems good. Extend trust.